That's good. Okay, so we'll go to speaker mode. Okay, so everyone, welcome tonight to the meeting of the June meeting of IPMS London. For those who don't know, I'm the president, Stuart Clark, and we've also got some other members of the executive here as well. So yeah, we just like to welcome everyone. This is our second attempt. We're using Zoom for the first time. Our good friends at IPMS Toronto and Hamilton have done this before, and we're looking forward to giving it a whirl. So we're just going to move on here. So brief agenda tonight. So just to cover some Zoom etiquette, as I said, when you come in, obviously you're placed into a waiting room. I will let you in. When you come in as Zoomed, and I'd really prefer you leave yourself, or Zoomed, muted. I prefer you keep yourself muted. It does help with the background noise, especially when we've got 20 of us. And yeah, if someone's unexpectedly getting noisy in the background, I may just mute them, then you'll have to wave or something if you want attention to come back in. All right, so some club business. First and foremost, we're very, very proud to have a special honorary membership being bestowed tonight. So Mike Hill's dad, Peter, you can see Mike there. He's the guy that does all these weird and wonderful vacuum forms. He's a bit weird, but we don't hold it against him. His father, who is 90 years old, and again, Mike, speak out if I say anything wrong. He is in Ottawa, and he's getting back into the scale model hobby to keep himself out of mischief. And according to him, his wife says it keeps him from being underfoot, out of her hair as well. So very fascinating man. I had a good email conversation with him. Mike's told him quite a few stories about us. So he's been posting his updates in our IPMS. Mike's been posting at the IPMS London Facebook page and the Grey Butts Facebook page. And it's really been good. Some of the comments and that we're really enjoying hearing this. Like I said, he's 90 and he's just knocking them out like you know, a 5-year-old, like there's no tomorrow. And they're really good qualities. So you know, there were several people in the club that approached us and said, you know, we should do something, make him an honorary member. And we said, yeah, great. What a fantastic idea. So he couldn't join us tonight, but we're very proud to do that. Mike, we've got his address. We're going to get a membership card out to him. And is there anything else I've missed you want to say on his behalf?
No, I think you hit it on the nail head. He's enjoying making the models, and I think that the big point is he's having fun. It's taken his mind well off being locked in the apartment for what, two and a half months now.
Yep.
It's done its job, and I've got the gut feeling he doesn't want to stop.
Good for him. Well, with us lot, why would you want to?
Yes. His build rate may slow down now that he's able to get out and go shopping and visiting.
Right.
But I'm sure there's going to be days when, as with us, it's rainy and you've got nothing to do. Grab that plastic and have some fun.
Right. Well, like I say, we'll just, we're happy to have him. At some point, we got to try and get him into a Zoom meeting or on the Grey Butt session or something to that effect.
Yeah.
That would be really, really awesome. So yeah, we're definitely enjoying it. And again, we're very proud to have him as a member of the club. And we should also give a shout out to the hobby shop in Ottawa. Is it Bill's, I guess?
Bill's hobby has been tremendous. Bill's shop and where my parents live and where Bill lives. I'm sorry, I've said that backwards. Let me try that again, guys.
Okay.
My parents live between Bill's shop and where Bill lives. So whenever I've ordered a model or paints, he's been nice enough that on his way home, he just pulls in, drops it off, and he carries on his way.
That's awfully
for
nice.
that F86 build, my Bill threw in the decals. It did cause my father some problems, but hey, as you know, he's 90 and he had fun.
Mm-hmm.
He's got those two Vampires Hobbycraft. I'm thinking that after 20 odd years, those decals are toast. So just this afternoon, I sent a note off to Bill asking if he can help us out in any way. I don't know what he normally carries in the way of decals.
Right.
His reply is, I got a stash of stuff here. I'll cobble something together for the two kits and I'll drop it off.
Awesome.
No charge.
Well, that's
So
damn nice
I
of
think
him.
he's enjoying what my father's doing as much as we are.
Good, good. No, it's been really good. And yeah, he was gifted those by someone else in the apartments he's in, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
A lieutenant colonel who unfortunately has taken a quick dive through dementia
Right.
and can no longer build.
Well, that's unfortunate. But anyway, yeah, no, we're really proud, and that's an honorary lifetime membership. So as I said, Jeff's going to make arrangements to get the card mailed out to him. I did give Jeff the address, and we'll go from there. And if once all this stuff settles, if he's ever down here, you have to try and arrange it when we have a meeting. If we can ever, if stuff ever improves, we'd love to meet him in person.
I wish I could take you up on that offer.
I know. We'll see what we can do. You
Yeah.
never know. We have to just think good thoughts and we'll go from there. Okay. Is there any other updates, Jeff? Do you have any other updates or anything like that we need to know about?
I think for me, you might want to talk about the library for meetings in the future.
Yep. Okay. I'll mention that as well. Poor Dave's having internet problems tonight, of course. Murphy's Law, Blappy. Dave, there you go. You're back. Hopefully your internet will behave yourself for a while. We'll see what happens. Mr. Dawson, do you have anything that we have to cover from your end, Bill? No, he's unmuted. Hang on, I'll unmute you, buddy. There you go.
I've been working like a slave,
Attaboy.
9
Attaboy.
hours a day, 6 days a week, and then in between I try to sleep and be dad and husband. So
Hey, that's all you can do. As long as, we all noticed that one of your daughters accidentally came into contact with a model, and we all have to admit the cute face she had just melted all our hearts. How can you be mad?
yeah, that one actually looks like me, but on her it works.
Yeah, it does. It's amazing, eh? Good for you. Good for you. Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. I'm going to mute you again. Okay. Next up, we have an update from IPMS Canada. Carrie,
Yep.
Go ahead. You have the floor, sir.
Okay, so this won't take very long. I just wanted to keep everybody up to date as to what's happening. I think in one of the earlier meetings, I mentioned that we're putting together new guidelines for the chapters, not necessarily new rules, or some they could be perceived as rules, but just guidelines as to how we would like to see the chapters operate. And it's really a document that is going to be a two-way thing. So we help the chapters help National Executive. That's going to be a little delayed only because of what's happening with the COVID-19 thing, but it will be rolled out, I am guessing, before the end of the summer, maybe at the latest early fall. But we're going to be sending out a draft to the chapters, so that's something that perhaps, Stuart, you can keep an eye out for,
Certainly.
and so that you have an opportunity to talk to membership about it.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. We'll be sure to
Yeah.
pass that along, and I'm sure
Yeah.
the other chapters will as well. So,
Yeah.
okay. I
So-
know. Go ahead.
So there's just a couple other things. One has to do with membership itself. We just would like everybody to know that if they're trying to renew your membership, or you want to join, it's all online now. We no longer accept checks. So everything is done through PayPal. So
Awesome.
you can go to the IPMS Canada website, you can join or renew, and then payment is through PayPal.
Okay.
If you don't have a PayPal account, we are, I think, in the process of maybe doing e-transfers, but PayPal is absolutely the easiest way of doing it. So hopefully everybody is okay with that. The real problem with the checks is that there's so few now that pay by check. Going to the bank is problematic, but it's something that we're moving towards. All right.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I can.
And all of this too will be in my my next column, which will be in Beaver Tales whenever that
Okay.
is.
All right. Well, we all thank the work that you and the other executives do. So that's
I appreciate
awesome.
it. Thanks.
Okay. So now we're going to move on to the show and tell. So let me just advance the slides here. So on the tables, and as I said, as we started at the beginning, a copy of these will be available at our website at ipmslondon.ca by the weekend. Blappy's also got a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll make that available as well as the recording. So, all right, onwards and upwards. So Dave and Mary, who aren't able to join us tonight, as always, they have a selection of items. So the first slides is parts 2 and 3 of my Apollo lunar spacecraft. So I think this is the Dragon one. Some of these are a little bit fuzzy, I'm afraid, but he always likes building big subjects. So this doesn't really surprise me. I think this thing's going to be a monster when it's done. I assume you're all seeing this.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure in case you were all being polite, but I doubt that highly.
So what scale is that in, if I could ask?
I'm not sure if it's 1 to 144th. He didn't mention, but it looks like it's the entire Saturn V rocket. So it's either 72nd or 1 to 144th. Either way, it's going to be big. Yeah. And this is his next project. He says he's running out of kits soon, so I'm sure he'll be happy that the stores are open now, the modeling stores. So that's a wild weasel. All right, Mr. Alf Goodall, you are here. So you want to talk about yours?
Yeah, it's a work in progress. This is the Tamiya Cromwell Mark IV. I'm building it out of the box. It's a really nice kit to build, actually. Goes together really well. Didn't give me too many problems, so it's been primed. This is a coat. Had to mix 1-to-1 a couple of different colors to get the correct color here. If you go to the next slide, so there's obviously some more work to be done, but just actually working on the wheels today. So gonna put those, get those assembled today. And then I've started actually to do some track work. So this is my first time painting in like 40 years. So
Looks good.
so yeah, it's I was actually happy with this. So I put a metallic coat on it, and then I put a couple of different other colors. I wanted a little more coppery gray color, so I've got a little bit of work to do here before I, get mud and sand on it and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's coming up. I was actually
Looking nice.
reasonably impressed. Yeah.
Looking nice. And sorry, this was the Tamiya one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a really nice kit. It's it's like I say, you can build it right out of the box. The tow ropes will be the only thing that I bash. I'm going to use some jewelry wire. It comes with string as a tow rope,
Right.
which isn't great, and but jewelry wire will work really well. So
Very nice, sir. Very
Yeah,
nice.
so there you go.
Okay. Moving on. Peter, is Peter here? Let's look at our list. If he is, he has to unmute
Here's
himself.
Mike's dad, isn't he?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Oh, God. See? Sorry. Mike, this is your dad's stuff. You want to talk about it? Duh. I was thinking the other Peter. So this is his Spitfire. Mike, you got to unmute yourself. Hang on. I'll unmute you, buddy. Hang on a sec. Got to wait to unmute him. Come on. This is the one thing about Zoom. Sometimes, there you go. Okay, you're on.
Yeah, my father's, most of his kits here are going to be Airfix.
Mm-hmm.
172nd Spitfire, obviously. P-51 Mustang, Tuscany Airmen. 125th Revell Nomad. That one pushed him out of his boundaries, and I don't think he really wants to go back to one of those.
I think it looks good.
Yeah. That's the F-86, and you can see some of the wrinkles in the decals, but hey.
Those are old decals though, so you can't, I got a set of those too. I'll be using on the Skyhawk next, so they look good.
Yeah.
And this is all hand painted, right, Mike?
Hand painted with Vallejo. And obviously he's not up to masking and painting canopies, but hey, he's having fun.
He's having fun. If he loves it, that's the only thing that counts.
And I'm really impressed with that, how he managed to get that camouflage scheme in there.
Yeah, that's very good. And the other thing too is like he's been knocking them out. Like he does like one a week.
I know.
He's got he has tons of time. Like I said, I got a nice email from him, and he said, "Yeah, my wife likes it too because I stay out of her hair."
That makes sense.
So that worked well.
Yeah.
Okay, next is George. Let's Let's just unmute George. Hang on, I'll unmute you, buddy. Just give it a second. Hang on. There you go, George.
There we go. Evening, everybody. This is really great that you've organized this, Stuart. I'm really impressed.
I'm glad we can get everyone on board.
Yeah, it's terrific. Like everybody else, there's a little extra time to model. So here's 3 creations over the last 3 months. The first is, to me, is 172nd Mosquito. Pretty much right out of the box. I added some brake cables to it and added a few extra parts in the cockpit, rebuilt the radio boxes because they were sort of pretty basic. Other than that, like Tamiya, the kit goes together just beautifully. The fit's really good. And I just scored it up a bit. I tried the painting silver on the propeller caps there. Sprayed silver first, and then sprayed it with a chipping material.
Yep.
And then sprayed it the color, and then chipped away at it with a little tiny piece of sandpaper to get a very subtle chipping. It was my first time doing it, so it's something I got to keep practicing. The stickers I got from Extra Deco, they show the mosquitoes belonging to the Dam Busters Squadron in 44. They use the mosquitoes as a fast pathfinder to mark the targets for the Lancasters that were not far behind. Go to the next slide there, Stuart.
Yep, there you go.
This is an Airfix 172nd BF 110. Again, I got a hold of some decals from Extra Deco and configured this to represent a Lieutenant Felix Brandis flying out of Finland in 42. He was credited with 14 victories. Some say he got 18. Some discrepancies on the internet there. But unfortunately, his plane crashed and killed himself and his co-pilot on return from a mission. I added some brake lines to this, added some extra detail with some scrap plastic in the cockpit, none of which you can see when the glass goes on, but I know it's there. I know it's there. Okay, let's go to the next one, the last one.
You bet. Hang on. There you go.
This is an FW-189A. This caught my interest because it was so unusual with the boom tails and all the glass, which turned out to be the hardest part was working with all that plastic glass and trying to mask it and make it look decent. I didn't do too much to this either. I did cut the upper window doors and pose them open so you could see some of the interior because there was a lot of detail in this kit. This is an ICM kit 172. This was converted into a fighter, a night fighter, and used on the Eastern Front between 43 and 44. Slow, but apparently effective with its upgraded radar and guns. And that's what's been keeping me busy.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I'm sure that greenhouse was just fun to paint.
Oh, it was delightful.
All right, Mr. Jeff.
Yeah, this is just continuing on my saga of resurrecting the old Bell X2 vacuum form model that I started about 30 years ago. Now it's at the future stage, so it's moving along. The Bell X1, it's a 172nd Tamiya, and as I said at the last meeting, it came with enough body parts to make 2 planes and enough decals to make at least two planes. All I had to do was scratch build some wings for it, so that's what I did. I laminated a bunch of cheap plastic and just sort of sanded it until it kind of got the aerofoil shape, and scribed in the panel lines and glued them on, and that's the gray one up top. The orange one, I started putting the decals on, and they're terrible. They all kept breaking up, so I'm going to probably have to look for a secondary set or something, or find some better way of doing it. But otherwise, no, they're coming along nicely. And those are like Guinness in the background. Guinness is a tribute to Mike.
What scale was that, Jeff?
172nd. That's a temporary stand. That is just basically there to hold them while they dry.
No, I'll have to look through my supply of the decals.
It's just,
I have 172 in those that profile.
Oh, if you have any, Norm, it'd be great. I was shocked. I thought that they looked, to me, decals look great on the paper, but they would not come free.
Yeah, they get that sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'll have to look through my book and see what I got.
This one is an old Dragon 1200 B52 with the X15 model, and I've had this around probably for 20 years, maybe 15 to 20 years. It's an awful kit. I mean, it's really terrible. The decals are great though. They actually work very nicely, including the wing walk decals, which are always the hardest for these things. The hardest part for this was trying to get the cockpit windows. Those are just painted on, and they're kind of hand painted, and they kind of look it. But I couldn't do much better than that. They're probably about 1/8 of an inch at the widest, so they're not that. And I had to spray paint on some of the other decals, like the fin flash on the tail, because there were no decals to match it. There were so many different paint schemes for this plane, but I really liked this one because I love the orange and I love the day glow and I love all that 1950s, 60s stuff. So anyway, that's that one.
Oh, let me go to the next one for you. It looks fine from it passes the 3-foot rule.
Well, this is my thing. That's why I like that picture. And this is
Yeah.
just the continuing saga of trying to make a model of that Stearman that I took a flight in from the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum. And the decals on it are courtesy of Bill, or at least the rondelles are courtesy of Bill Dawson. Thank you very much, Bill. And the rest of it is FK. It strikes me as kind of profane, but it's the beginning of the number. The actual number on the plane is FK 107. And I just have to find the ones and the O's and the sevens. I think I have enough in my stash to make it work. And I was just beginning to start rigging on it right now. So that's where we are on this one. And that's where we stand.
Very cool. What is it, Tamiya paint or Vallejo? What did you use for that?
For that one, I started with an enamel, which is probably an old Model Master yellow enamel.
Right. Okay.
And I wound up sanding most of it off because it just got orange peeled like crazy.
Right.
And then I went over it with the Vallejo, with a new primer and Vallejo, and then a whole bunch of coats of Future, all sort of dry sanded in between. It's getting there. It's getting to the point where it's gonna be nice and smooth.
Very cool. Okay, let's see here. And that is it for the slideshow. So we will go back.
Mine wasn't finished in time, so.
Sorry?
I said mine wasn't finished in time.
That's all right. We can always do it next time. So
Yeah, I happened to get an acquisition build. A friend of a friend, his brother built the P-34, the ELF, the 112,
okay.
the Formula One car.
Yes, I
And
see
they
it there.
shipped it from England in a cardboard. Yeah, they shipped it from England in a cardboard box. Assembled.
Oopsie.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oopsie.
Like I had more suspension parts that we knew what to do with, and a little bits
Oh,
and pieces.
brother.
So that's not bad. That's how it turned out after 2 weeks.
Oh, good. It's coming along nicely. Very nice.
But
Very nice. Very good.
All done now. So I
Okay.
can give it back to him over the next week or so. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, we're going to move on to the presentation portion. So, Mr. Blappy, we'll unmute you. You are unmuted, sir.
Okay, hope you
And-
can you see the surface of the bench here okay?
You may have to just bring it down a bit. There you go. Perfect.
Not better? All right,
That's
maybe
good.
chopping my head off, but that's okay.
That's all right. We don't, Yeah,
All right.
again, we all have faces for radio.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, I'll do a quick demo here. I'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing here, setting these molds up and pouring some resin in that. And then I've got a bit of a PowerPoint. It's mostly just images, not a lot of information, and I'll just go through the slides and talk about what's going on in there. We'll sort of reiterate some stuff here. And then by the time that's done, I'm going to use a fast resin on this. So it takes about 20 minutes to cure. So by the time I'm done doing my PowerPoint and maybe answering some questions, the timer will have gone off. And I can demold these parts and show you that process and talk a bit about, how I set the molds up and why I did them that way and stuff. So you'll know. And so that's what I'll basically do. So
Okay, Dave, just to confirm, you're going to share your screen for the PowerPoint, or did you
Yeah,
want me to do
yeah,
it?
I'll have a PowerPoint open here, so I'll share
Okay.
my screen for that when the time comes, okay?
That's good. Okay, perfect.
hopefully my internet survives it. You know, at about 6 o'clock, I got set up down here and my internet cut off here in the studio, and I don't know why. Sometimes the router does auto updates and stuff here, and I think maybe it decided tonight it was going to do it, and it did it twice in a row. So, but it's back now. It seems pretty solid. I never have any trouble with it, so it should be fine. If you lose me, I can always get on my phone, and I can get Stuart. I'll get you to. Do you have the PowerPoint downloaded?
I got the PowerPoint downloaded. I've got it loaded. So
Oh,
yeah,
we
worst comes to worst, we'll just talk amongst ourselves until you come back.
Sounds good. All right. So basically, this is the casting area here in the studio. We got a bench here set up for it. The surface on the bench here, just so you know, is this material called puckboard. It's like a white plastic. They use it for hockey arenas around the outside and stuff because it can take a real beating, right? The nice thing is you can spill resin on this. The resin cures and it peels right off. Like nothing sticks to this really. It's you can wash it with solvents or whatever you want to do, and it's really good stuff. So, anyways, what I've got here is I've got molds for a little X-37 space plane. I used to make these for Fantastic Plastic Models. I've still got a set of the molds kicking around. So I dug them out, and I thought it'd be a good example to do something quick and easy to show you guys what to do. So basically, I'll go through this quickly. I'll sort of explain what I'm doing, and then the presentation will talk about this in more detail. So I'm just using a little bit of this mold release that I have here. This is the best stuff you can get now, is this man release. There are other mold releases. There's this one here, which is called Universal Mold Release from Smooth On. The problem with this one is this is a silicone-based mold release. So when this gets on the surface of the castings, it basically repels paint and everything. You gotta really, if you've ever had resin model kits and you can't get paint to stick, they probably use a silicone-based mold release, which is really good to keep your molds lasting a long time and stuff like that. But if it's a model and you want to build it, this is not the stuff you want to use. This here is more of a, this is basically, it's like a petroleum distillate almost, I think, in here, and it's suspended in these cans, and it washes off very easy, and it actually helps paint stick a lot of the time, I find. So I've never had any trouble with that and having parts being very paintable. So I just gave the molds a quick spritz with that. I used to use baby powder. A lot of guys talk about that to put in your mold. It helps out a lot to get the resin to flow in nicer and get better surface detail, a better finish. I actually stopped using this years ago. There's still a bottle kicking around in case of emergencies, right? But talc is not good to breathe. And I, as a guy used to do production casting, you don't want to get that in your lungs for a prolonged period of time. So at some point, I switched from that on the advice of a friend, and I went to just using regular cornstarch. So all I'm doing here is I'm just taking a bit of cornstarch and a big blush brush here, and I'm just putting some cornstarch in the mold. Right? Let's see that or not. And this one here is a little open face mold, so I want to make sure the powder gets down inside of there. So be like really generous with it, right? And it's kind of messy, but that's resin casting. This is a messy business. If you're going to do resin casting, make sure you wear clothes you're willing to ruin. If you get resin on your clothes, they're done. So I had shirts I used to cast resin in, and they would get like resin on them eventually, and you could like actually snap pieces out of the t-shirts or out of the pants I was wearing, because it would become like, there'd be like hard spots from resin getting on it. Occasionally accidents happen, a mold leaks or it bursts or whatever, and then you're in trouble. So, and then what I do is I've got a little air gun here. My air line's set to 50 PSI right now. It's all the pressure pots need. And I just blow out the extra dust, the extra powder with a bit of compressed air. You know, I'm not wearing my mask. I usually do. Although in this day and age, masks and gloves can be hard to come by because you're all getting bought up, but the supplies are starting to come back now, I think. So I know there's a few Canadian companies putting out masks and stuff now too. So, and then what you want to do is close up your molds, right? And you always want to have some kind of backing boards. I've got, if you look over here on the shelf, I'll turn the computer, right? This is like years worth of backing boards, right? All these here. These are even all the ones I threw out a whole bunch when I moved from one place to another, because I knew I'd be doing less of this, like production wise. So I still do some of it, but not a lot. So you want to have backing boards in the back of your molds, because what it does is, if you try and put rubber bands on the mold itself, it's going to distort the mold and squish it, and you don't want that, right? You want to have nice even pressure, so I'll put these bands on here and I'll show you. And I'm just using these colored rubber bands from Staples. They're really nice because you can double them or you can triple them, right? Depending on the amount of pressure you want to have on your molds. You just sort of, I'm right-handed, I got to do it from this side. Put these bands on here. I did this for a living for probably 15 or more years, so it gets to be you just do this kind of thing in your sleep, basically. I don't know how many tens of thousands of times I put rubber bands on molds, but I think it was a lot.
What are your molds made of, David?
The molds are these green ones are Mold Max 40. It's from Smooth On. I'll talk about it a little bit more during the PowerPoint as well. But this was one of my favorite rubbers. It's a fairly affordable rubber. You can get it readily from Sculpture Supply Canada down in Mississauga. Well, actually, I think they're in Etobicoke is the actual address, or Munster Ave down there. Their service is great. If you order before like noon, it gets shipped to UPS, and you'll get your order will show up usually the next day. So it's like next day service through UPS. So that's pretty nice. All right, so you can see here I put the rubber bands on the mold, get the mold lined up nicely in here. This is actually kind of important. The attention to detail is important for this. So you can see I've got that mold banded up now. With the boards on there, it'll have uniform pressure. It'll hold the mold shut, right? So let's see. Next is going to be the resin. So I'm using Smooth On 3Cast 300, right? So this is a pretty good resin. This is a pretty fast resin. So you've got about 3 minutes to get it in the mold and into the pressure pot. So you always want to, the part B settles out pretty quickly. So you always want to give this one a really good shake. This again is an easy resin to use. It's a 50-50 mix, part 1 to part 1, A to B. So it's really easy to use and measure. Mold rubber is a little bit trickier. Mold rubber, you got to use, it's a 10 to 1 mix ratio. So you got to use, and that's by weight. You got to use a scale to mix your rubber.
When you shake it, Dave, does it introduce air bubbles?
It does, right? Like, if you can see that or not, there are bubbles down in there, right? So one of the ways to get rid of those bubbles, give a little spritz of mold release, and those bubbles pretty much go away, right? And that's the part B, it's thicker. The part A is the thinner half. This is the isocyanate half, if you want to get scientific about it. So, and I reuse these bottles. I have 5-gallon buckets. Like this is an old 5-gallon bucket here, right? So I'm using it as a garbage can now. I mean, that's how I buy this stuff, and then I decant it in the smaller buckets. So I have leftover buckets. So they get pretty crusty after a while, but you can reuse them as long as you make sure they're clean when you put them new resin in them. And you don't want to mix up the part A and the part B. Also, simple rules about working with 50-50 mix stuff like this. Never take the cap off of 2 buckets at the same time. Because I guarantee you at some point, you're going to put the wrong cap on the wrong bucket and you're going to contaminate it. Guaranteed, guaranteed. So,
have you done that, Dave?
What's that?
Have you done that?
Oh, perhaps. At least once. You think you learned the first time, but nope, you're in a rush. You're not paying attention. Somebody distracts you. So
it's called a learning process.
Well, yeah, right. So, and I mean, I always have the buckets sitting the same way, the same place. And you form habits, right? You want to form these habits so you're consistent every time. Once you figure out something that works, consistency is key. For mixing the resin, I just buy these cheap measuring cups. You want to get the ones that are like polypropylene, right? That the softer, not the clear, shiny acrylic. Because these polypropylene ones, here we are. Right, this is a bigger one, right, for a larger batch of resin. But the cured resin comes right out of the cup. So you can reuse these cups like 100 times if you take care of them and you take the resin out. I mean, running a business, you know, you get real frugal, right? So you want to save as much money as you can. So I learned early on to use these really cheap measuring cups, and you know, you can get them at the dollar store sometimes. When that whole BPA scare happened, they became hard to get for a while. But now you can get them at Walmart and stuff again, or the dollar store or whatever, right? So it's a way to go. And depending on the amount of resin you're mixing, I mean, this is like whatever. This is like a liter. This is like 500. Then there's like the little, you know, 1 cup ones, right? You can use. So, anyways, put the part. So you'll notice this is blue. This resin is actually white when it's cured. So I pre-color a gallon at a time. The job I'm doing right now, they wanted the parts to be blue. So I use some of this Smooth On So Strong tint. Is that camera focusing properly?
Yep,
Okay.
works fine.
Okay. So anyways, so this is the Smooth On So Strong tint. You can get any color under the sun for that. There's like weird colors like flesh and stuff. And they got these brighter ones, like these UV resins that don't fade in the sun, right? For this bright yellow and stuff. So, anyways, sometimes if you want to, you can, you know, add a drop of color as you're mixing if you don't want to color your whole bucket of resin. Or you can just color the whole bucket. I have a 5-gallon bucket colored blue and a 5-gallon colored gray right now for the job I'm doing. So, and then you just, you know, want to drain this in there for a second because the part B is a little bit thicker. So it takes a second to, you know, get most of it out, right? So I just stand it up like that for a second and, you know, have a quick little break or whatever. So put that in there. All right, now this is going to happen pretty fast, all right, because I've only got 3 minutes to get this poured into the pressure pot. This is a pretty small batch, but I don't want to dilly-dally too much, so I'll try and talk about what I'm doing. So I'm just using tongue depressors to mix the resin. You know, I stand it up in an old, you know, beer cup like this, right? So I just stand the old sticks up in there, and you can just keep reusing them. You know, when you're being frugal or when you're doing the same thing 100 times, you know, things like how many times can I use the same mixing stick actually becomes something to keep your mind occupied so you don't go completely insane. So, all right, I'm going to mix this now and fill the molds. Just want to make sure you mix it good. Scrape the bottom of the cup, scrape the sides of the cup a little bit. Give it a little back and forth, right?
How do you know when it's fully mixed, Dave?
Experience. Like it's mixed now. It incorporates very quickly. So I'm putting a few little drops in this open face mold right now and sort of poking it. So I make sure it gets full. All right, and then I'm gonna pour it in this one. Pour it in the big guy.
How does the air escape?
There's vents. So I'll show you in during the PowerPoint. There's actually like a sprue you pour the resin into and it fills the parts and the resin comes up. You see this one here. I'm going to tip it up. I shouldn't, but the resin went in that hole and you can see it coming out of these 2 vent holes. So I know the parts are full now, right?
Okay.
That's like the telltale.
It's just like what they used to do when they poured steel.
It's just like pouring steel. Like, I mean, with this Smooth On rubber, you can actually pour, like molten metal in this Smooth On resin. So you see, I mixed way too much. I'll just top up the mold here a little bit to make sure it's full before I put the lid on, right? I'm using a little tiny pressure pot right now. This is a 2.5 gallon one. So it's one of my baby pressure pots, as I call it. I've got 3 this size.
What's your big?
Show you the bigger pressure pots there in a second. And then you just close the vent, put the pressure on. I got a timer. It's been being used for a number of years with wet, gooey hands, but it still works. So, and then the pressure pot is full, so I can close that valve for now. So now in 20 minutes we can demold those parts. So now that's my little 2.5 gallon pressure pot, right? If I turn the
pressure pot.
If I turn this here, I don't know if you guys can.
Dave,
Otherwise,
someone's
there's
asking
one
you
over
a
there.
question. Someone's asking.
Let him go.
What's that? Sorry, somebody asked a question?
Yeah, I said, what's the purpose of the pressure pot?
So what the purpose of the pressure pot is when you, like, when Norm asked, am I getting bubbles in my resin when I shook that cup, right? So look at this, guys. That's how fast that resin goes off. So it started to go off. The edges are still soft, and it's kind of like soft, right? And it's like, it's hot. This resin, this is a fast resin, so it's really hot right now. So you pour a large mass of this resin, and it like gets really, really warm. Like I've done big pieces, and I swear you could fry an egg on that thing. It's so hot, right? Like I've taken the big pieces out of the mold, and like gotta like use a towel to handle it and like set it somewhere because it's so hot I can't hold it with my hands, right? It's completely insane. So anyways, the point of the pressure is you'll get bubbles in your resin, like some micro bubbles and stuff. So when you put the pressure on, that pressure crushes the bubbles, right? And the resin cures and you get bubble-free castings, and that's how you get real nice castings. If you want to do any amount of casting or you want to be serious about it, I mean, you need to invest in a bit of equipment. Like this pressure pot here, I think Harbor Freight sells one that size, and it's like 50 or 85 bucks or something like that. So it's not a huge investment, right? Now your little airbrush compressor is not going to fill this. You're going to need some kind of a larger capacity compressor with like a couple of gallon tank or something. A pancake compressor would probably do it, right? I got a compressor here, and it's like a 60-gallon tank, so it's like this huge freaking tank, right? And I mean, it can fill a pressure pot that size there. So that's a 65-gallon pressure tank, right? So it's 2 feet across and 4 feet tall that I have there.
That's where all the body parts go, right?
That's right. So, anyways, yeah. So the pressure pot is good to get the good quality casting. So, I'm going to leave that going right now. I'm going to do my PowerPoint, and let's see if it'll let me share. You got to enable sharing there, Stuart. I don't hear Stuart now. Stuart's got himself muted.
Okay, I think I have to make you the host, I believe. No, hang on a sec.
I think there's a way to allow.
Yeah, multiple participants can share at once. Advanced, who can share? All participants.
Can you tell this is the first time we've tried this?
Well, this is the pro account, so yeah, there's got a few more options.
Yeah.
Dave, that's not how you did the Martian maggot, right?
No, the Martian maggot, I can show you that after, actually. The Martian maggot is I cast resin cylinders in pieces of plastic pipe, and then those resin cylinders I load up on the lathe and I just turned them down. But the making of the resin cylinders, I do it the same way, right? So
right, because you want the air-free, the bubble-free starter.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, and I make these big cylinders and then I work them, so.
Okay,
right.
Dave, see if you can share now.
There we go.
There you go, all right.
Okay.
Yep,
So,
yep. So that's your, yep, perfect.
do that. All right. So, okay,
And
here we are. So,
yep.
So I'll talk about this briefly. There's a few pictures there of some of the work I've done over the years, and like there's a big set of molds there down at the bottom, right? So, so it's all about the molds. So if you want to get good castings, really 90% of this process is making really nice molds. I don't care how good you are at pouring resin. If the molds are garbage, you're never going to get a good casting out of it. So the real science in this is the molds, and then having maybe if you want to get, a couple of tools sort of thing, you'll need a couple, to invest, I don't know, maybe a couple $100 or something in tools. But then basically you're ready to, do some resin casting, right? At least for small parts anyways. So there's 3 basic types of molds. I had 2 set up here today. So there's one at the top. This is like an open face mold, right? A lot of guys are aware of this, and it's really easy to make. You basically take a sheet of acrylic and you glue your parts to it, or a piece of plastic or something. You want something flat anyways, right? You put a box around it, you pour your rubber on there. When the rubber cures, you take all the parts out, and you're gonna have a negative of all your parts, and you can put some resin in here and make little bits and pieces and stuff. This is just kind of a scrap mold that are you guys in a little box in the corner, or does that show up? maybe not. Okay, hope not. Anyways, so I mean, this here is a mold I made with all kinds of, you know, what we call greeblies in the Star Wars science fiction world, which is the parts on the outside of all the Star Wars ships, right? So we would just glue them down, and then when I have leftover resin doing jobs, I would just pour some resin in here, and you have what's called a crusher plate. So you put like an old mold or a sheet of acrylic over top to give you a nice flat thing, so there's not a lot of flash on your castings. I'll show you about that after in more detail too. And then you just make parts. Anyways, I used to make all these molds all the time and get all these parts. You know, I'd have friends over and they would glue parts down too, and we'd make all kinds of stuff. So it was a lot of fun anyways. And this is like your regular pour mold. It's got a little, you know, a pour spout comes in here, fills the resin in the part, and the air vents out the top, right? And a pry and fill is similar to this, only instead of having a big sprue coming down, there's just a vent, and you just basically kind of pry the mold open, pour the resin in, and squeeze it shut, and some resin like flows out. It's a little bit messier, but they're a little bit easier to make, and they're good for little parts and stuff. So
Dave, would you put that big flat pour thing in your pressure pot?
yes, I will. I will. It's good to put these in a pressure pot too, because it'll, you know, crush any bubbles in there. And even with the plate on top, enough air can sort of sneak in to crush your bubbles, right? And the thing is to make sure, I make sure my pressure pots are level, and I have a deck in the bottom. I can show you guys after. I have a circle I cut out of this puckboard stuff, and I put it at the bottom, so I got a flat deck to set my molds on. And then any resin that drips in there, I can just scrape it out, and away I go, right? So the clay you're going to use for this, there used to be a stuff called clean clay, and it was like the industry standard, right? And it turns out, I found out some years ago, it became unavailable, and I didn't know what was going on. Well, what happened was, it was like some mom and pop shop had like this secret formula for this clay, and it's like, you know, it's got to be sulfur free, or the rubber won't cure against it. It'll stay gooey, right? And you want to have a certain hardness and all that kind of stuff. So, and then you want a non-drying. It's like plasticine, right? It's an oil-based clay. So it says here in the description, anyways, for that too. And so they went out of business, and I guess they sold the formula to this other company that makes this Formic clay now. And this is the exact same stuff as the old clean clay, only now, you know, it's got a different name on it, right? So, I mean, you can buy this at Sculpture Supply. Like a pound is like four. It's like 4 little sticks of butter, basically, you get. And you know, it's like $7, right? So, and this is the best stuff. I've tried different clays, and there's like, you know, some people will use like an air dried clay, but it doesn't work as nice. This is the best stuff, right? I mean, you can even cast something, or you can sculpt something out of this, and you can dump rubber on it, right? And then you can like dig all the clay out of that mold, and then you can cast resin in there, and that's going to give you a casting of whatever you sculpted out of this clay. So guys have done it for like, you know, appliques for if you're doing like, you know, head castings or whatever, or you're making add-on parts for things and stuff. This stuff isn't that great though. It doesn't sculpt really smooth, and it's soft, and it's easily damaged. So, but for making your molds, that's the best stuff right there. So one of the tricks to making molds is, I see a lot of guys doing a lot of, honestly, weird stuff with this. I came up with this idea, actually, it was years ago. I was watching Ace of Cakes, of all things, and they were rolling out fondant flat, and they were using wooden dowels and rolling pins, and the wooden dowels gave them a consistent thickness for their fondant, so it would all be like whatever, like 1/8 of an inch thick or something, and they could cut all the pieces or lay it over cakes or whatever. So what I do is, on the left here, you're seeing I've got like an electric fan heater, and it's blowing on the clay sitting in like a bin, and it would get the clay really soft, and then basically I throw it on the bench, and you know, I squish it like you're making bread almost to get all the air bubbles out, and then you roll it flat while it's still warm, because it's easier to work with, right? And I just put a little strip of wood on each side for whatever thickness I think I want. I got like some 1/8 stuff. I got 1/16, 1/8, I think 1/4, 3/8, and then like 1/2 inch or 3/4. So I can do really thick pieces. I think it's 3/4 inch rolls of clay for like really big stuff, right? And I just use a piece of plastic drain pipe. It's like, I think it's like a 4-inch piece of drain pipe or whatever. I'm using as a quote unquote rolling pin for this process. And this is really nice. And you get a really nice flat piece of clay to mount your parts in, right? Which is what I'm doing here basically, is then I lay out the parts, as you see on the left here. This is a more complicated mold. I've got a double stack of parts in here. This was an experiment. It worked okay. I wouldn't do it normally, but this is the first time I've done this. So I basically figured out where I want to have my parts, where I want to have my pour stubs or inlets or whatever you want to call it, sprues for the resin to come in, right? And that's what, this is here. The resin will come down here and it will come in this way and this way. So I got roughed in where I want that stuff to be, right? Then I, put my parts aside and I sort of set them laid out the way I had them. And what I did here when they were sitting here is I traced around them with a toothpick. So I knew exactly where they were going to go. And then over here, I used like a number 11 X-Acto blade and cut out the clay where the parts were going to go, right? And then I basically mounted the parts in the clay and I cleaned up around the edges so they were nice and clean in that. And then I put all these dimples in here and I added a box. Also on the right there, you can see I cut some strips of clay. So those strips of clay go around the outside edge of this, and this helps prevent leaks and it helps key the mold together better. So this is actually not my idea, really. I was given a set of molds at some point that somebody else had done, and I was giving them to cast, and the guy had done this a little bit different, but I thought, well, that's kind of a neat idea. So I adapted it and made it a little more precise than just like cutting some kind of a crappy looking groove, right? And you can see I put a ton of dimples on here. The purpose of these dimples is so your mold stays keyed, because I'm sure if anybody who's ever bought a resin kit and there's parts in there and there's a big offset where the seam was, the part isn't aligned, and you got to either build it up with putty or grind it down or do some of both to get the part back to the shape it's supposed to be. That's because the guy doing the mold was lazy and didn't do this, right? So you put all these dimples in here, your mold's going to stay nice and aligned and keyed, and your seams are going to be like really clean, right? Which is one of the tricks to this, is have a nice clean seams with almost no flash on them whatsoever. I'm going to go back one slide here. For what you want to do when you get the part into the clay is you can see basic tools here. Number 11 blade. I got this little metal chisel. I got like this is a bamboo sculpting tool, and I got this to do decal work, and it never worked for that. But it turns out the end of this is a perfect shape to make dimples. So that's what I use for all my dimpling. I've done it for years and years and years. So when you get the part in the clay, you want to use maybe the sculpting tool to get the clay, make sure it's up against the part and semi-clean here. And you come in with this chisel, and there's going to be a little bit of a meniscus up against the side of a little bit of a curve up against the side of the part. You want to clean that up and get as perpendicular a seam as you can. So where your part comes down, the clay is really clean and it's really perpendicular to that part, right? So you just go around it quickly with this little tool. I kind of dab it, go along in little sections till the whole thing is cleaned up. And that'll give you the best seam you can possibly get. It'll be a really clean seam. When you cast your parts, it'll come out. Any flash will be like, it'll be like thinner than tissue paper. You could brush it off with your finger or scrape it away with your fingernail. And that's what you're going for. So making the mold box, I used to use this stuff called newspaper board. You can't get it anymore. I've gone to using things like foam core. Works good for this. You can get 3mm mat board. It's a little more expensive than foam core, but the 1/4 inch foam core is pretty good. If you're doing a larger mold, you want to go to the thicker foam core maybe. Or I'm even using like 1/4 inch hardboard or MDF from Home Depot. I'm cutting into strips and I'm gluing the corners with super glue, and it's making a pretty heavy duty mold. It seems a bit excessive, but I mean, a 2x4 foot sheet of that stuff is going to cost you like $7, right? So, I mean, if you have waste or whatever, it doesn't really matter because it's like $7 and you get this big piece of wood and you're going to have kick-ass mold boxes. And you can see here, I'm using a little machinist square. So I'm making sure these cuts that I make on here are 90 degrees, right? Because what's going to happen is, I'll show you in the next step, is when you go here, that's filling it. Where'd that go? Hold on, removing the clay. Here it is. So when you have to flip your mold, if you're doing a 2-part mold, you're going to want to go around the mold box and loosen it, slide the mold box off of that part, cut off there'll be a little bit of a meniscus on the edge of the mold here from the way the rubber went to the side of the box a bit. You want to trim that off so the back of your mold's nice and flat. You'll get better castings that way. Then you remove the clay, you go around your part and you sort of clean you can see here a bit of crusty stuff. I'll use a toothpick or whatever, and I'll clean that off. But you want to make sure your part doesn't come out of that first mold half. Your seal between this part and your mold, that's precious, right? That's going to give you the best quality seam and the best quality part you can get. And when you slide this box off, you're gonna put mold release on here and slide the box back onto that mold. You want those sides to be perfectly straight, so the sides around your existing mold half are perfectly sealed. So no rubber is gonna leak down on the side like that. So that's the ticket there for having like perfect mold boxes, wherever you happen to make them. Let me go back here. I got these a bit out of order, so I apologize. I threw this together at like 12 o'clock at night because I've been working 14-hour days here. So when you're gonna measure the amount of rubber you want, a lot of guys use rice. I happen to have a 5-gallon bucket of styrene pellets I got somewhere. Somebody gave them to me at some point. I don't remember where exactly now. So I've got these, but you put saran wrap in the mold box, and then you put your plastic pellets, or like I said, some guys, you can use rice. Old rice works good. So you just buy a bag of rice and use that to measure your rubber volume. It's the best way. You can do a calculation like, length, width, and depth, right? And get a pretty accurate number. But when you got really weird convoluted parts, and sometimes you've got molds that aren't really flat, you got like a piece of the weird shape, so you got like a big section sticking up or a big section sticking down, then it becomes a real challenge to measure your volumes accurately. So this is an easy way to accurately measure your volumes. I mean, I had a piece of plastic wrap that I had pulled out of one of these boxes, and I had literally used it for 10 years. Just because when I was done, I would fold it up and stick it like whoop, with the little pellets in the bucket, right? And I kept taking it out and reusing it and taking it out and reusing it. So it was kind of funny. So that's an accurate way to do that. Is everybody still there?
Sure are.
Okay, good. I'm making sure my internet didn't go down and I'm talking to myself.
Nope, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay, so this is the rubber, the green stuff you saw, Mold Max 40. It's a pretty good rubber. It's good for doing model stuff. If you were doing something like I'm doing a lot of prototyping work now, where I'm building prototypes and production prototypes and that kind of stuff, and proof of concept things, where the fit of parts is really important. The Mold Max series is a tin cured silicone, and the tin cured silicone has a little bit of shrink to it. You can calculate that shrink, that's a pain in the ass. There's also platinum cured rubbers, and the platinum cured rubber is more expensive. It's probably about 30 or 40% more expensive, but it's got no shrink whatsoever. So if you're building prototype parts or something you want, or if it was like for little models, it doesn't really matter, but you don't notice it. But for really big models, if you're doing like a big 2-foot, whatever, aircraft fuselage or something like that, and you want to hold the lengths and the fits and stuff, then you'd want to use a platinum cured silicone, which is Smooth-On has ones that are called a series called Smooth Sil, and they're really good. They're really fantastic. They got a new one now they just brought out called Smooth Sil 936 that I use quite a bit. It's like a blue rubber, and it's really nice and thin. It's easy to pour. It's easy to mix. So they had one that was called 935 before, and they even got a 940. But it's really it's really hard to mix and really hard to pour, and it goes off pretty quick. So the 936 is really good. So this is a standard anyway. They're all the good rubbers are like a 10-to-1 mix ratio, right? So you need to use a gram scale when you're mixing this stuff. Yeah, here it is here talking about it a bit. So you need to use a scale and measure this in grams. And I'll tell you, if you're going to be doing tiny little parts in resin or rubber, it's really hard I don't think really hard, but you got to be more precise. You got to be more precise when you're mixing small amounts, because any discrepancies, it's, exacerbated on some really small amounts, right? If you're a gram here or there, it could make a difference. So you definitely need to use a scale for this kind of stuff. This is just showing here, when you pour the rubber, pour it in one corner of the box and let it sort of fill everything else out, and then it'll get over the details and it'll work a little bit better. This here is a video. I don't know if you can see that or not. Oh, my timer's going off. This is the rubber being vacuumed. So basically you're boiling the rubber, right, and getting all the bubbles out. When you mix the rubber, it's really thick and you get a lot of bubbles in it. and it can cause a lot of troubles in your mold. You'll get voids, and those voids will give you like lumps on your castings and stuff, right? So it's kind of fun to watch that anyways. And so you can see it bubble in there. And yeah, so vacuuming your rubber is a really good idea, but vacuum chambers, you know, they run hundreds of dollars. If you're lucky, you can find a vacuum pump. For years, this is a Venturi vacuum chamber I finally bought, and I think they were like, I think it's like $400 or $500 to buy these from like Sculpture Supply or one of the companies that make these. But it's very good to have. You can find vacuum pumps, like I said, on eBay. I used a vacuum pump for years, and I just use one of my pressure pots, and I would hook it up, and instead of putting pressure in the pressure pot, I pulled vacuum on the pressure pot, right? Now, the trick is I couldn't see the rubber, so I had to be really careful I didn't overflow the bucket, because when this stuff bubbles up like that, it usually increases to about 3 times its volume. So if you have like a half bucket of rubber and you vacuum it, it's going to overflow. And, you know, I did it a few times over the years, not paying attention or whatever. So this allows you to see what's going on, and you can shut it off. Or what I'll do is I'll just shake the bucket around and, you know, bang the bucket around inside of the vacuum chamber because I can see it, and it breaks up the bubbles and keeps it from overflowing. So that usually works pretty good. Let's go show that again. Okay, this here I already talked about flipping the mold, peeling the clay off. One thing on here is once you get all the clay cleaned off your 1/2 of the mold, you've got to put some kind of a mold release on there, because silicone rubber will bond to itself like really, really, really good. Like I'm talking about, you got to cut it apart to get the part out of your mold if you forget the mold release. And, you know, of course I did that a couple times over the years too, early on. Or, you know, you forget something, or you don't get mold release on everywhere on the mold because something distracts you or whatever, or phone rings or something. So for mold release on this, the best mold release I've ever used is taking like naphtha cap fuel, right? Like you use like for your Coleman stove, and dissolving some Vaseline in it. So like if you take like a liter of camp fuel, right? Or maybe I'm going to say 500 liters of camp fuel, you put maybe 50 or 75 grams or something of Vaseline in there, and you kind of keep shaking it until it dissolves, and then you'll have a really nice mold release. You can brush it on all the rubber. You don't need to put it on the part, because the rubber generally doesn't stick to your original, right? Because if you have an original piece that's, you know, made out of plastic, or you've primed it with something to give it a nice finish before you mold it, then you'll be fine. But you want to make sure you get that mold release on all the rubber, because if you don't, it's never coming apart. So just naphtha camp fuel and Vaseline. It's like, I think it's one of the it's old school, right? I was taught it by a guy like 20 years ago, and I've just always used it. I tried different stuff that was available. The man release guys had like a man release 400 or something that they discontinued, but you know, it was a pain in the butt. You'd spray it on the mold, but you don't want to get it on your master because it would put texture on there. So it was just like, it was a pain in the butt. So I went back to the old camp fuel trick and just brush it on with a brush and be generous with it. And the camp fuel evaporates, and you'll see your mold shiny now. And what it does is leaves a nice uniform thin layer of Vaseline on the whole mold. And then it just keeps those two halves from sticking together. It's really simple. So I thought of something else I was going to say. Oh, so mold rubber picks up detail very, very well. If you have like fingerprints, like from like a greasy fingerprint on like a nice surface, and you pull a mold off of that, your castings are all going to have that greasy fingerprint. So it picks up every little fine detail. So when you're making patterns or you're making parts to cast or whatever, make sure those parts are real neat and real clean. And even before you pour rubber on there and the piece is all clayed up or whatever, like take a look at it and get the light to glare off it. You may see some greasy fingerprints you put on there. You just use like a cotton cloth or whatever and just clean those fingerprints off so you don't have any, because the rubber will pick it up. It picks up everything. Here I am talking about mold release. So I sprayed some of this in the mold at the start, right? And there's the cornstarch. So this man release, you can get it again from Sculpture Supply down in Toronto, or any resin supplier will sell this stuff. I've tried some different resins over the years. You can get like Alumilite at Michael's, I think, and some other different resins in that. But the Alumilite, excuse me, it kicks off, like cures really fast, gets really hot, and it's really hard to work with. And the hotter your resin gets, the faster it burns out the mold. Like this smooth on here, I was just using the 300. It cures really fast, so you know it gets pretty hot when it's a large mass. But the part that I had, the thinner parts in the mold, it's not going to have caused a problem at all. It won't heat it up or burn the molds out. It's when you get a large mass like that. So, but the Alumilite, even in small little batches, it gets really hot, and it's really going to burn out your molds quick. So, and for the cornstarch, I mean, cornstarch is cornstarch, right? I mean, I just buy the no-name brand stuff, like I got a picture of there I found online, and you know, it just, you put it in the mold and blow out the excess, and you'll get a nice casting. So, that's about that, I guess. Here I'm setting up the molds. This is a different set of molds I was doing years ago. These were 2 identical molds, so I could band them up together. A lot of the time, most of the time, doing resin casting is demolding your parts, setting the molds up, and rebanding them. So when I could have 2 identical molds and I could put them together like this was like awesome. So I could like shave my time down on these kits, cast them quite a bit. So this is a nice shortcut. But you can see here in the left photo, the rubber bands. I always put 3 rubber bands on, because sometimes these things will fail in the pressure pot, right? And when they do, if you don't have enough bands on there, your resin's going to start to leak out and your casting shot, right? So I found early on for these, a mold that you can fit 3 rubber bands on, this was the way to go, and give you some redundancy. Something that I found out doing production casting is about once every 2 weeks on the same day, you'd have 2 or 3 rubber bands fail at the same time. And usually when they failed when you were putting them on the mold. So you had it pulled tight and the rubber band would snap and it would leave a welt on the back of your hand or on your arm or on your belly or something. And, you know, much colorful language would ensue when that happened. It was unavoidable, but it just happened once in a while. So you can see in the middle picture here, you know, I got the mold stood up nice. And on the right one, you can see I leave a little bit of space at the top. So if any resin overflows out of the top of the mold, it doesn't run down the outside of my casting boards, right? Because if it runs down the outside of the boards, it gets on the rubber bands. When it gets on the rubber bands, that becomes a pain in the ass. You got hard cured resin on your rubber bands, and then they cut your hands, or the bands snap more often, stuff like that. So having some space around the mold like that allows the resin to run down the mold and drip wherever it's going to go, but not get on your elastic bands. When it gets on the elastic bands, it just causes all kinds of headaches. You try to avoid it at all costs. Resin, like I said, I use a lot of smooth-on resins. My standard go-to resin is a 305. It gives you a 7.5 minute pot life, which is pretty long. And really, even after 7.5 minutes, it starts getting thick, but not really getting hard yet. So, you know, it gives you a good amount of time to work with it. You can do I was doing pretty large batches of castings with that stuff and load them into pressure pots and casting them. So this is definitely my go-to resin. It works really good. The shrink on it is negligible. If you do a really big part, like say a 16-inch long part, you can measure it like a 1/16 of an inch of shrink on that part maybe. So it's really, really nice and very understood. There's faster resins. Oh, there's clear resins and there's translucent resins, and you can color them all and make them all different colors and do clear blue and all kinds of stuff. And I've done everything over the years. I did running lights for a couple of UAVs, and I did clear canopies for, you know, science fiction models and all kinds of stuff like that. And so you get really good with it. The clear resins are a bit tricky. You got to leave them in the pressure pot overnight and then let them sit it with the air for a while and stuff like that. But so the choices are almost limitless, but the Smoothcast 300 series is really nice. There's 300, there's 305, and there's 310. So 300 is the 3.5 minute pot life, demold in 20 minutes. The 305 is about a 7.5 minute pot life. You can demold it in 45 minutes. And the 310 is like a 4-hour pot life, or a 20 to 30 minute pot life, I think it is. And you can demold it in, they say 4 hours, but you really want to give it like 6 hours. So it's like an overnight resin. I consider it for really big parts, or for if you have to pour a whole bunch of stuff or do something weird. There's also like, there's other numbers too that I never use in the 300 series, but it's a tan colored resins, but I find they're not as nice. I've cast large blocks of the white resins and they come out really good. And the tan stuff, I cast a big cylinder one time and I was machining it. And then I found a big stress fracture inside of it. So it's not as nice a resin. It's a little more stinky as well. If you want to color your resin, the white liquid plastics are the way to go because you get real pure colors that way. Here's a little, pictures of me doing this, pouring it, mixing it. You can see down here, you can use a syringe to fill molds too. I do that sometimes. Some molds are a bit stubborn, so use a syringe and slowly inject it. And it kind of, helps you solve some problems and push bubbles up and out of the mold and that. And that bottom right picture there shows, the inlet's been filled and I can see the resin coming out of these two vents. So I know it's full. And sometimes you'll take the mold and you'll sort of like tap it on the bench and sort of tip it 15 degrees every way, and tap it and work it around. And eventually if there's any little trap bubbles, you'll see them come up and out of your vent, right? So when you're doing this, you get to do what's called get to know your molds. There's always one or two parts that are going to be hateful, and they're not going to want to turn out like 40% of the time. And sometimes you got to go back and you redo it, or you find a way to like, take the mold and, tip it 45 degrees and like bang it on the bench 5 or 6 times, and you see a bubble come up and out, and you don't get that one annoying bubble in a bad place, right? So, yeah, that's that, I guess. And this is just about open face molds a little bit again, right? It shows, that one that I showed before, and it shows that I just cut up old flat molds and I use those as crusher plates on top. If you don't have old flat molds, you can use a sheet of acrylic, spray the acrylic with mold release and put that on top. And it'll give you a nice thin sheet of resin on there. This one's a little bit thick actually, but nice thin sheet of resin on the back of the part, and all your little parts are on there. You can cut them out, maybe sand the back slightly, and you got a nice part. If you've ever bought a cheap resin kit or some of the Eastern European stuff or whatever, and there's like parts on a sheet like this, but the back of that sheet is like an eighth of an inch thick or something, right? And you got this big bunch of crap to sand off the back. It's because they didn't do something as simple as using a cover plate like this to throw on top of the mold when they were casting it. So, and you can see how to do it here. This is basically a sheet of acrylic with a bunch of parts. These are vacuum form plugs for a kit. So you just, glue them down to a sheet of acrylic. When you glue them to the acrylic, don't super glue them if you can help it. I use carpenter's glue. I find that Elmer's glue isn't strong enough. I find Weld Bond is too strong. Super glue, you'll probably destroy the part getting it off. If you use like the carpenter's like wood glue, the kind of yellowish stuff, it's got a good bond. It holds the part down nice, but you can pop the part back off your sheet of acrylic easily and, save it and, whatever. So that's a trick there. Over here is another info. So this is a trick I did. I was making parts in a flat pour mold. You can see here, there's like 4 slits I put, right? So when this part comes out of the mold, that was done in a flat pour mold, right? And it's got 4 little nubs sticking out the side, right? And this was a little trick I did. So a little circle, that's all you see, a little circle there. You pry it open and boink, that part pops out and it's got those 4 little details on there, right? These were the little, there it is again, right? Split it open, out it comes. So these were the little quad thrusters that they had on the Ares 1B from 2001, the one that travels from the Earth to the Moon. It's like the spherical one with the thrusters on the side. This was a kit for Stargazer models. I cast this for years and years and years. I made hundreds of those over the years. So you can see the other big flat pour mold in the background, I think, here. It's got like a thin sheet of resin on there. You can see it. And this is me organizing all the parts into trays to keep track of how many parts per kit. So I would demold the parts directly into a tray. 4 of these per kit, 4 of those per kit, 4 whatever, 2 of something else, right? Just to keep track of all the parts. So you can see there how well that works out, right? I'm just saying, yeah, you see it just splits right open. So this was a pretty neat little trick. This was a fun kit to cast actually. So, and people wonder, you got a little bit of flash on there, but it's like thinner than tissue paper, right? And you just pluck it off. I think I did one back here somewhere. You can see I'm holding the part up and I'm showing it off. I think it was the second one I take out. Yeah, I think so.
So Dave, did you become independently wealthy through this practice?
No, sir. This is let's see. This is barely above minimum, maybe. Depends on what you're doing. So some projects were good. Some projects paid really well. This one paid pretty good. Some don't pay so well. So, you're making a decent living, but you're not getting rich. You're working your ass off. But you know, you're kind of working for yourself and you're kind of keeping your own hours, although you have obligations, you got to pay bills, right? So there's lean months and there's good months. And the nice thing is, you know, or the one thing was, I had some good customers over the years, so I could just say to them, you know, hey, look, I need, you know, I would show up with a project. Like this year, this is Rocket Ship Luna, right? This is a 1/288 scale Rocket Ship Luna. Now, Pegasus Hobbies put out this model in 1/144 scale and 1/350 scale since then. But I did this for Fantastic Plastic, and I basically said, hey, you want a Luna kit? And I just quoted him all the numbers. I said, this much for the pattern, this much for the molds, this much for the castings. And he said, let's do it. He'd send me a down payment, and so I'd go ahead and do it. So I was able to create work as a contract caster, and I had, I didn't have to absorb a lot of the risk on jobs like that, right? Because I knew I was getting paid for the molds immediately. I knew I was getting paid for the castings immediately, and it was up to the customer I was working for to, you know, market his kits and sell them out the door, right? So, so it worked pretty good. You can see another mold being made here. It's got some weird contours in it, right? So you can see where I stepped it there, right, to go around the part. If I was to do this mold nowadays, I'd make it just completely flat. I think this is one of my very early jobs, Buck Rogers Starfighter I did for somebody. This one was a little more straightforward. Has the, you know, the inlet coming here and the vent on top. Pretty straightforward. I cut the mold away from a square. I made it, you know, hexagonal or whatever this shape is to save on material. Rubber's the most expensive material you're going to use. It costs twice as much as the resin. So if you can cut back on the amount of rubber you're using, you're off to the races. This here is a canopy I did for, I think it was the Viper Mark 7 for Black Sun, I think, models. And this is a 0.5 millimeter thick clear resin casting that I did. So it is 1/72 scale. You can see the number 11 X-Acto blade in the background. So this is where I really push my limits and I realize what I can get away with. And this is a translucent yellow casting I did just because I think I had the resin around. I was pouring something else. And this is the 1/144 scale DX1, the Discovery from 2001. This is the old resin kit that I was doing for Stargazer models. You can see all the parts. I think there's 155 parts in this kit. So I made hundreds of these models over the years for Stargazer. This thing sold really well. And then, you know, right when I was getting out of the business, Mobius announced their styrene kit. So, you know, I got out of the business just in time. This is one of my cash cows. This would, every time I got an order for these, I knew my mortgage was paid for the month. So it was nice.
Very good.
So that's it, boys and ladies, if any are around. Let me unshare my screen.
There you go. Yep, you're unshared.
That was great, Dave.
All right, so I'm going to demold these parts now.
Dave, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any question? While Dave's doing that, go feel free to unmute yourself. If you can't, just wave frantically. No, I know. Nice try, Mike. Anyone else? No? See, Dave, you give a good explanation. No questions.
Oh, that's all right.
Or they're all asleep, one of the two.
Well,
No,
he's
not
doing that. I'll put my Victor up here.
That was awesome, David.
Yeah.
I got it up on its gear this evening while you guys were gathering.
Oh, yeah. Looks good.
Oh, look at
Looks
that.
good, Mike.
Thank you, Dave. I got to run now. So,
All right. See you later.
All
Good
right.
seeing you, Tim.
yeah, take care. See you
Yep.
guys.
Make sure you take some pictures of that, Mike. As always, it looks really good.
I just made a post.
Well, see, you're faster than me.
All right. You know, it's pretty and blue and solid.
Attaboy.
So,
Is
first
it
is
still,
really-
is it still hot, Dave?
No, no, this is even the one in the bucket now. It's cool. It's a little bit warm, but not much. And this isn't warm at all because this was thinner, so smaller mass doesn't produce as much heat. So this is the little engines here. Let's see if I can get these out of there. So, it's just all this. See, that is thin flash on top. I put a plate on top, so it's just like
Oh,
it's really
yeah.
nice and thin,
Yeah,
right?
real thin.
No cleanup really at all. And this is a really soft Now, what is this one? I forget. I used to use this rubber all the time, and then they made a better rubber, and I stopped using this one. So this is a really soft mold rubber because it allows me to just like go like this
Cool.
and just like
It's like giving birth.
doink, and then there's my little
Nope. Move up. There you go. Yep.
There it is.
That's good.
Yeah.
Right there. Yep.
my little nozzle, right?
Little nozzle. Very cool.
And production casting, I put 6 of them in a mold at once, right?
Mhm.
So I could make 6 kits worth of those little engine nozzles, and laugh. All right, here we go, 6 of those. So I got 6 of those engine nozzles. Sorry, I got my back to you there. And then this one here, I'll just pull the bands off. What I'll do is open it up.
The joys of live TV.
Yeah, and you can see,
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So there's the inlet there, and the resin goes across, and it just fills all the little parts, and there's all the little vents on top.
Very cool.
I got a light right above me here. It's actually not helping me, but anyway.
No, it's good. We can see it.
Actually,
it's-
that helped.
it helps.
clarified
Yeah.
it.
And then this little guy just comes out in one piece if I want. Right. And then I used to engineer these. When I was being taught this, I was doing work for Tracy Brownfield at Federation Models, and he hated having any kind of sprues or anything on the parts when I delivered them. And so he taught me early on to have it so there's a little bit of flash on there, right? I mean, that flash will come right off, but I can just like remove my part from the sprue and I can clean the flash off, right?
Oh yeah. Yep.
And then that goes in a bag, and there's almost no cleanup at all, right, for the model maker. So there's a little bit of a nub at the top, and that's it. So you get really good at getting away with how little, of a port gate on there you can put, right, sort of thing. Yeah, so there's a little bit of, again, there's a little bit of flash on there, but I can just go like this, poof, and it's gone, right? So, and that's because I rolled the clay flat. I made it so it had a nice smooth surface. I gave it lots of dimples, right? I got enough pressure on the mold, and I mean, you can see there, that's like, right? That's the mold, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the real trick. Lots of, I mean, I see guys that do a big mold and it's got like 4 big giant dimples on it, and I think to myself, what about next to you want to get fairly close to the part, but not so close that you distort the clay beside the parts. You still get a nice seam, right?
So how many shots can you do with a single mold before it starts to wear out?
You can do, it depends on how smooth the parts are. These are really smooth. I bet you I could get away with doing 60 pulls, right?
Oh wow.
Now this green rubber is nice. Some of the, like the Mold Max 30, it's like a pink rubber. When it starts to get old, it starts to get like texture and gets all kinds of little like micro cracks in the surface, right? And I found that the Mold Max 40 doesn't do that. So as long as you got a smooth part with no detail to pull out, you can use the mold like an insane amount before you have to replace it. So this is for like production model work, the Mold Max 40 is like the best for value, for quality, for firmness. Like and this is a 40 durometer rubber, so it's fairly hard, right? So when you there's less chance of the mold distorting the parts and leaking and all that kind of stuff, right? It's the best stuff. I'm gonna do something here while we're doing this. I'm gonna set this back up very quickly. And I'm gonna show you an example. Just
Yeah, you're doing well. We're more or less on time.
okay, good. So so you see, I set this back up now with 2 rubber bands on it, right? And if this didn't have a sprue in the middle, I could still pour resin in here by simply prying the mold like this, and it opens at the top, right? And then I've got 2 rubber bands. So one helps pull it back shut again, and the bottom one works as like the pivot point, right? When you do that, and it just comes open, right? And I could literally just pour resin in the top of here, and then just like wait a second, maybe tap it on the bench and see some little bubbles come up, right? And then I can just squeeze it shut. When I squeeze it shut, like the resin flows out and it makes a bit of a mess and it's a little bit crappy, right? But it works really good actually. For little molds and small parts, it's a great way to do it. It's a really great way to do it. And I mean, honestly, adding all those extra, you know, the extra sprues for the inlet and stuff, that takes time when you're making the mold, right? But the trick is when you're doing molds too, if you want to get a good casting every time, don't cut corners on your mold. Don't be like, oh, that's falling down on me. Don't be lazy. Don't make crappy molds. Don't whatever, right? So.
Oh, you got the ghosts coming.
Don't cut corners on your window blinds either.
Yeah, exactly.
Problem was, I'm facing west.
Yeah, you got the sun.
Before I did this, I had like light beaming in here, and like I was standing here, and I was like a silhouette, right? And I'm like, that's not gonna work. So I had to like find cardboard and put it on the window because there is frosting on the windows.
At least you're not. At least you're not blaming the cats.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you know, yeah. There's no cats here. But. So, anyways, what was I saying about that? I was saying don't cut corners on making your molds. Take your time, make really good molds, and you'll get really good castings every time. This one's nice. So this is, you can see now, right? You see that there? And something I did on this, because this is like kind of like a styrene kit. It's 2 halves, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to always put your seam on some kind of a corner or an edge if you can help it. By doing that, you'll get a really clean casting again. Like, you know, you get these resin kits and there's going to be like a mold seam right across a detail area or something, right? And there's all kinds of greeblies or some kind of a detail or some kind of an exhaust thing or something. And it's got like a big mold seam right across it at a jagged angle. And you got to go in there and try and clean all those little details now. It's a pain in the ass, right? So you want to really pick an edge and do it. Like even on these little pieces here, if you look at my flash on there, the flash is right in the middle of the edge of that part, right? So when I take that off, it's a little bit, and I can literally just go like this, right? And I maybe haven't even got to sand that now. I mean, right? And that's really what you want to do. You want to pick your sharp edges. Don't run it through details, all that kind of stuff, if you can help it. So this guy is.
So what is this actually? You're taking out? What part is it?
This is the body for the X-37B space plane in 1/72nd scale.
Okay.
This guy's fun because, so.
There you go.
Okay.
Very nice.
And it's even got this little vent pipe, if you can see that or not.
Yep.
On the bottom.
Yep, we see that.
Right? Yeah. And what I did for that was, you can maybe see where it was in the mold here, up there, right?
Yep.
And where it was going to come out, I just put a tiny little cut right there.
Wow.
To help it come out, right?
Very cool.
And this rubber is firm enough that when you let it go, you see like that little cut disappears, right? Kind of, and it shows up, it disappears. So.
Very good.
And then again with this part, like you can see now, oh no, there's flash, right? But it just comes away. And then again, I engineered this one not bad. So these 2 sprues just come off the front, right? And then the inlet, usually the vents can be smaller than the inlet. So you want to have bigger, so because the air flows better than resin, right? So the air blows out the hole at the top as the resin fills it up and you get a good casting again. So I think you just come right, yeah, see these just, they leave a little bit of a nub on there, but I think the model builder can deal with that, right?
Yep.
So you got yourself a little half of a space plane.
Very good.
And that's it. And then maybe I'll do this. And I'll take my little cutters here and I'll just, you know, trim that off. And I'm done. And
There
that's
you go.
it. You got yourself a space plane.
Very cool.
So Dave, is 3D printing going to replace this, or is it an alternative to it?
I'm not sure if it's going to replace it or not. I mean, it's very time consuming. It's costly. 3D printing is really good for doing patterns for these resin kits, right? And I mean, this space plane, I got my hands on the actual NASA file for this shape, right? And I gave it to a CAD guy, and the CAD guy turned it into a kit. And so I did this in 72nd scale using that. So this is completely accurate to what the Air Force is flying right now, Boeing, right? And I had this done in this scale, and I had a 48 scale one done. And I've got files for 1/44 and 24th as well, I think. So, so I don't know if it's going to replace it yet. I've got this little resin printer here that I'm doing stuff on. It's one of those Anycubic Photons, it's called. And let me see if I can bring up a picture here. This is kind of a gimpy way to do it. I sent a picture to Stuart, but it was way too late. I knew it was, but I gave it a try. So this here is a model that I'm 3D printing right now in pieces. I paid $30 for the file. This is the Razor Crest from The Mandalorian.
Yep.
And you can see all the different parts there, right? There's quite a few parts. But like this back section, I'm printing, it's a 72nd scale. So only certain size parts, like I think it's like 14 centimeters tall, can fit on the print bed, right? So this piece here printed at 0.025 layer height took 24 hours to print. Just the one part, right? So it's pretty darn slow to print these things. And they're still gonna require a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of sanding and stuff on a starting kit would. So it's not gonna replace it yet. I think maybe in 20 years, you'll be able to buy your file for $30 and then you'll be able to print out the parts if you want to build it, right? Or print out a whole thing that you just got to paint, right? So, yeah, so I don't know if, I think eventually it will, but I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we're a good decade or two away from it, but who knows, right? We're heading towards a singularity, so who knows what's going to happen.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions? No? Okay, Dave, we really appreciate this.
Okay.
Really good to see that. And again, we'll have some links and stuff like that. And we'll make the slideshow and that available as well. So
And this is going to go up on the video will go up on the website somewhere?
Yep. We're going to have the video up on ipmslondon.ca as well as your slideshow and all that. And I'll add that other picture that you sent me late. Yeah, technically it was about 45 minutes before.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I got something for show and tell. I could send them this picture that I did about that. It's pretty late, so if it doesn't show up,
it's pretty
whatever.
late. That's all right. Okay, so I just want to also mention a couple of other things here. I know last time we were talking a bit about Wingnut Wings and stuff like that, and I know we've mentioned it during our gray butt session and stuff like that. I just want to point out for those of you, I'm sure all of you know, I do a podcast with Anthony called the Scale Model Podcast, but also with us is David Goldfinch, and he, Julian, and Ian do one for a podcast from Australia called On the Bench. And Dave was fortunate enough, he's had 2 shows dedicated to part of the demise behind Wingnut and Wings. The first one 2 episodes ago, he had a good interview with a reporter who actually properly sourced the story about what happened. And the last podcast he talked about was with an actual ex-staffer. So they're very good, and I recommend his podcast anyway because he's a good guy. But David, was there anything else did you want to give us the quick summary of what happened to Wingnut Wings, and then we'll leave everyone else to check out the podcast.
Yeah, sure. Basically, Peter Jackson's company, the aeroplane where he builds real-life World War I aircraft, was just bleeding money left, right, and centre. And also, so was Wingnut Wings also, because they were making these huge projects. And Peter was just building it for love rather than for profit. And as a result, because it was bleeding so much money, they just turned around and shut it down. Interestingly, on the podcast where we had these, particularly the ex-staffer, David Johnson, on, we had to be really careful as to what we were talking about because I didn't want Sir Peter Jackson coming after me with his lawyers or anything. So there was a lot of stuff that we spoke about that didn't go to air because it's stuff that's coming down the pike in the future in regards to some of the ex-staffers, where they're perhaps looking at doing some projects in the future. So when we get more information on that, obviously then we'll sort of put it to air. But yeah, pretty exciting, interesting story, disappointing story for all those of you who sort of like and enjoy building those kits. And yeah, it was a great couple of shows.
Exactly. And again, thanks, David, for getting those interviews. I know you had a good relationship with a lot of those guys and, so close to home. So hopefully, yeah, as you say, hopefully they'll come back. So as I said, just do a search on the Bench podcast, and I will put the links to David's podcast. And they roughly do every 2 weeks, just like we do. Well worth checking out. So check them out. And I appreciate you joining us tonight, Dave.
I think it's really great. This technology allows me to go and visit model clubs all around the world. So
Well, I agree. It lets me attend, the IPMS Toronto, the IPMS, Hamilton. We have Alan here from IPMS Hamilton tonight. Yep, he's waving there. We've actually got a special Musaru Cup model contest. Alan at IPMS Hamilton and Lightworks Distributing are sponsoring, and Alan and I have to arrange a time in July. Hopefully we can get together, and then we'll wing that. Then we will send that kit down for Julian, and I'll be building one, and we'll have lots more details and a lot of fun.
Indeed we will.
Okay, Alan, if you're there, I see you're still there. I understand there's some good news from the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum. They should be opening soon.
Yeah, they haven't got an official date yet. They've been given the go-ahead to get themselves ready. I imagine probably maybe the second week of July.
Awesome. All right, that's just fabulous news. And for anyone who hasn't been there, please go. Alan hosted David when he was in Canada a couple of months ago, and I know he had an absolute blast. So good stuff. Okay, does anyone else have anything of relevance? Anything else they want to bring up right now?
I just wanted to comment on Duncan's full-on Grizzly Adams approach there.
Yeah, what is that all about? I was going to say something too. Jeez.
I don't know. He's not saying anything.
There we go.
Well,
I figured since I was locked away, I may as well do something different. And never having grown a beard before in my life, I thought, what the hell, why not give it a shot? So, yeah, I like to think more of a cross between Colonel Sanders and Kenny Rogers.
Strangely, it makes you look more intelligent.
Oh.
I don't know. So yeah. So anyway, we will do another one of these in July. If anyone wants to do a presentation or a demo, you see how easy it is. Dave did a fantastic job. Just let me know. Throw me an email or a Facebook message. I also want to thank some of the folks who haven't been here before. Johnny, good to see you. Johnny's in Waterloo. And I will have to post, I think if he hasn't already, he's got to post the panther he sent me. You sent a picture of your panther to me. Make sure you post it up on the IPMS London page, John.
On the Facebook page, you mean?
Yeah, on the Facebook page.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, make sure you do. That's awesome. It was an awesome job. So, okay, well, if there's nothing else, I'm going to call this a night. Like I said, thank you again for everyone. The recording and the slideshows, etc., will be available on the weekend at ipmslondon.ca. There's also the Grey Butt sessions that Michael hosts the other 3 Wednesdays of the month. And again, the links to that are always on using Google Hangouts at ipmslondon.ca. We might switch to Zoom at some point because I do find the video quality a lot better with multiple people. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, my wife says the same thing about she's doing her knitting hangouts with all the girls and they notice it's a lot better too. So happy wife, happy life, gentlemen.
Yeah, I like the fact you can do the tiled view and see everybody like the giant Brady bunch here all at once.
Yeah,
as opposed to the one thing popping up. I like that. You can double click on somebody and bring them in close or whatever if you want and whatever. So yeah, it works so good.
It also works well because I can highlight a particular view. So when you were doing your presentation, I basically, no matter what, everyone was watching your screen. So hopefully that shows up in the recording and that. So yeah, no, it works well. So that's good. So, all right. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Jeff reminded me about the library. London Public Library, where we meet, they have reopened for curbside service, but we still haven't heard anything. And as a board member, I'm pretty sure, like we're canceled until Labor Day. I'm pretty sure it's going to go well beyond that. until it's because of the social distancing and having so many people. So we're just going to continue to try and do meetings like this. We'll try and figure out some other stuff. I have a thought about maybe a virtual contest. So a few different ideas the executives are bouncing around. So, but yeah, feel free if you have any suggestions, and let us know. And as I said, I want to thank IPMS Hamilton, IPMS Toronto, IPMS Vancouver. We had people from there. David all the way in Australia. Is there an IPMS Melbourne club, Dave?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Just curious. I know you guys talk. You have a lot of clubs down there, so that's cool. So again, it's a good organization. So, okay, that's enough
We've
of me.
also got my. I just want to say my buddy George is on here from Holland, Michigan. He's sort of taken a bit of the mantle of the Black Models resin casting thing. So he wanted to see what's going on. So
George, just remember, if something goes wrong, it's all Dave's fault, because he probably gave you a shitty casting. he's going to be nice and quiet. I can unmute him. Hang on, let me unmute you, George. Hang on a second. There you go.
Thanks. Well, I guess I could, but he wouldn't appreciate it if I did that. So
we ignore him anyway, so that's fine. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, George.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yep. Okay. All right, gentlemen, you folks all have a good night. Keep on modeling, and we'll see you on the interwebs.
Stuart, tell me if you need my version of the recording.
Yep, I'll let you know, sir. Okay, thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Good evening.